Welcome, everyone, to Stealing the Show, how Barnard was the ticket to a successful career in entertainment. My name is Dr. Marilyn Stocker, and I'm a member of the Barnard class of 1970, where I've been the vice president of the class and therefore running reunions for many decades. I have decades of experience with this honor of creating compelling and wonderful and heartwarming moments at our reunions. And I'm so happy that you are all there. And we have so much in common as alums in this. So it's just terrific. I also serve on the Leadership Assembly, the overall Barnard Reunion Committee, and that's why I have the privilege of introducing this panel. I also was a person, and I encourage you all to do it in the future, who spoke my story about Barnard at the Moth Storytelling Hour, and I was privileged to be the host of it a couple of years ago. So on behalf of the AABC Reunion Committee, I'm delighted to welcome you to this special program. This panel promises to be highly entertaining and I am sure fascinating. And the purpose is to hear how Barnard and the whole New York experience influenced our panelists, who have had very successful career trajectories in the entertainment biz and industry. You will hear more about who they are from our Gina Borden, who is chair of this committee and will be moderating the panel. But I just want to tell you that these three speakers are Camille Bernier-Greene, Jamie Babbit, and Jessica Alpert, who are all highly accomplished executives, producers, and/or entrepreneurs. So it's time to introduce Gina. Here's Gina to take it away. And thanks all of you for being a fellow Barnard alumni.
Can you hear me now? Yes, wonderful. Good morning, everybody. It's my privilege to introduce you to our panel. We have over here Jamie Babbit, class of 93. Director, producer, screenwriter, films such as But I'm a Cheerleader, The Quiet, recently an executive producer and director on the 2022 TV series A League of Their Own. We have sitting next to her Camille Bernier-Greene, class of 2013. Director of documentaries at the Onyx Collective of the Walt Disney Company. She has developed and produced projects for Bravo, HBO, Facebook, and Disney, and also in her spare time, volunteers as a community strategy lead for Project Healthy Minds, a mental health nonprofit resource. And last but not least, we have Jessica Alpert of class of 2003, CEO and co-founder at Rococo Punch. Am I pronouncing that correct? Okay. Which is a full-time service production company focused on editorial, corporate, and original content. She is also an experienced producer in the public and private sector, partnering with PBS, iHeartMedia, SiriusXM, among others. So thank you all for being here today. I would love to just open the floor to each of you and hear about yourselves in your own words.
All right, it's good to see all of you. So my name is Jessica, and I am class of 2003, and I had such a transformational experience here. I grew up in Houston, Texas. And was so happy to be in New York. And it really was an incredible 4 years that I think prepared me for the very rocky and exciting road of this industry. But just briefly, I think sort of the theme of my world and my life is the pivot and the having a creative imagination. So I started in public radio. I was there for about 10 years and worked in news and all these other things, and always dreamt of doing long form audio, which is like what everyone wants to do, a lot of people. But I was recruited to launch the Modern Love podcast with the New York Times, which is a really incredible experience. And I just want to tell a very brief story. So when we started doing the New York Times podcast, the idea was that we would have A-list celebrities read these beautiful essays. And there were like 600 essays, and we read them all and we categorized them. And then we went to the New York Times. Anyone from the New York Times here? Love the New York Times. But I asked, can you guys help me? Because I don't know anyone in LA. Like, I'm in Boston. Like, I don't know. They're like, no, that's your challenge now. And we had a budget of 0, right? For these, they only wanted A-list. So I think I sent out 300 emails. I got 300 no's. And I thought, oh my God, I think I'm going to fail. And then I thought, no, impossible. And I figured out that agents and managers had no interest in talking to me because I had a budget of 0. But then I thought, what about publicists who have to really get as many press hits as possible? So it was like that pivot, that creative thinking. And so we went out to publicists and we just pitched it totally differently. And Judd Apatow was my first yes. I will always have so much love for him. But the point is that failure was not an option. And we got 300 no's and we figured it out. And I felt like Barnard really prepared me for that moment. And 2 years later, Kate Winslet called us to read. She's like, I have an essay I want to read. And I thought, wow, this is full circle. So the whole thing is, I had no idea what I was doing. I had absolutely no training, but I had to do it. And I knew I had to. And I think that is something that Barnard really prepares you for, is just going out there and doing it. So I now run I co-founded a production company where we do that day in and day out. But Barnard gave me a great foundation.
Yes, sorry about that. Hi, I'm Camille Bernier-Greene, class of 2013. It's very full circle for me to come back here because I just feel very at home here, and it's funny to be on this stage because I've been in this audience so many times. But I think coming to Barnard, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to study. I was just excited to be in New York and learning, and had gone to an all-girls high school and knew how important it was for me to be around female-centric spaces, and coming here, and I was an English major and really kind of fell in love with story here, which has translated to every other part of my life, including people I've collaborated with, people who have hired me, people I've hired. Barnard continues to really be a resource for me in my career. And I think just being inspired by women and women's stories, even at my class dinner last night, I was amazed by who was in that room and the stuff people were saying and their experiences over the last 10 years. So I'm continuously inspired by this community, and it really has shaped my professional career in the industry. So I'm excited to talk more about that and hear about the wonderful people on this panel too. Big deals.
Hey everyone, I'm Jamie, and I graduated in '93, and I was back here actually, I think 2 years ago. We were shooting Only Murders in the Building, which was a real full circle moment for me, because the hotel that we're staying in is like across the street from all the locations that I was shooting. I was like, I'm back. But I studied foreign studies at Barnard and went abroad, and basically came here because I'm from Ohio, and I was like, I got to get the hell out of Ohio, and I cannot wait to go to New York City. And I was excited by all the opportunities that New York had. And I've always had a big appetite for experiences. And New York felt like the place for me. And I was so lucky to end up at Barnard, because what I didn't know before I came here was what a great internship program that they have here. I don't know what it's like now, but at the time, I went in and just said, hey, I'm interested in the arts. I don't know exactly what. And they said, okay, we have 3 internship opportunities. One is Days of Our Lives. One is the producer of Dead Poets Society. and one is like a intern at 17 magazine. And I was like, I really like Dead Poets Society. Maybe I'll work for that guy. So I worked for him 1 day a week for 3 years. And that kind of started my journey into the business of art. And what was great about that internship is I realized I had no interest in being a producer. But I think internships are great because they teach you what you don't want to do. And by my senior year, I was like, I think I want to be a director. I feel like that's more my style, because talk about like adventure all over the world and different stories and a more nomadic life and all those things. So my senior year, I was an intern for Martin Scorsese. So thanks to Barnard and thanks to New York City for that.
It's really wonderful. And Jamie, you already started speaking to this, but I'm curious, how did Barnard shape your careers? But also kind of two parts with that, how and if Barnard pivoted your trajectory post Barnard.
It's a great question. Again, I think coming here, I really didn't have a plan. I just took as many classes that sounded interesting to me as possible. And I had always been interested in the arts. I was in Bacante here and sang, and I had been a dancer my whole life. And Barnard was this great place where I could kind of get further into all of that and see where it would take me. And being an English major, I really just studied literature and was like, oh my God, I understand Emily Dickinson, and like, I get it, and I just thought it was wild that you could read these texts from so long ago and connect to it in my, Souls Read dorm room. But I just really fell in love with that as an idea here. And I guess in terms of my pivot, honestly, for me, a lot of my friends and the people I was living with were going to be consultants or lawyers or like had very clear paths. And I continued to really not know what that was until my senior year. I happened to be interning at the Golf Channel in Orlando, Florida, which is the randomest thing about me. The summer after freshman year, my mom was like, you need an internship. You're not watching TV all summer. And I got this internship at the Golf Channel because that was my local TV opportunity, and I fell in love with it. I was like, I'm gonna be a woman in sports, and like, this is it. I know nothing about sports. I don't like golf. Like, it's, it was just the kernel of being part of that world. So Barnard was this interesting opportunity to kind of allow me to explore story in different ways, and ultimately it was just the right place. Even though I didn't come in with a plan during that time, I really got to explore it in different ways. And when I graduated, I was part of the NBC Page program, where I was able to intern at different departments within NBC and gave studio tours at 30 Rock. So if you were there in the summer of 2013, we probably have met. But yeah, I mean, being here just let me explore parts of myself and fall in love with this medium that eventually has been a huge part of my life.
That's sort of the perfect summation of my experience. I think for me, I've always been listening. My mother said that when I was very young, I just stared at people's mouths. I don't know, but that really hasn't changed. I was fascinated by everything. And when I got here, I was just listening a lot and just blown away by everyone around me. And I think that just really got it all going, and me thinking about, I just want to listen to people's stories. I want to tell them also, but I just was so amazed by the people around me. And I think that Barnard really just gave me that foundation and that ability to just sit and hear other people. So that for me was transformational.
I knew I wanted to do something in the arts. I wasn't really sure what. Like I said, I thought maybe producing, and then when I interned, I was like, oh, no way. But I think probably the most instrumental thing that happened to me here was, I don't know if they have this anymore, but something called the Centennial Scholars Program. Is it called the Athena Scholars or something now? Okay. I don't know if it's the same, but do they give you money so you can do stuff in the summer? Is that the Athena?
At least when I was there, you could apply for summer grant money. Yeah.
Okay. So they had this thing in the 90s where I don't know who gave the money, but thank you to whoever that lady was. It was basically my freshman year, my Hindu professor, Barbara Stoller Miller, who died my senior year, sadly. She was amazing. But she was like, I think you should be in the Centennial Scholars Program. And I was like, I don't want to be a religion major. Do I have to be a religion major? And she was like, no, it has nothing to do with that. So I said, well, what is it? And she said, you basically take a class every year that's part of this program that I teach that is just like, read the Robert Moses book about New York City and write a paper, or it was kind of like a small little group of like 10 girls. And then we give you $5,000 to do something in New York City for the summer that's of your interest. And so I ended up taking film production classes during the summer with that money, which was really awesome. And then your senior year, you had to present your final opus that what you had done with the money. So I did a movie about E.E. Cummings. Not interesting. Love E.E. Cummings, but no. Don't do a film about poets. No, I don't know. Maybe it could have been better. I was not good yet. I was learning. But anyway, I think also what was great about that is you have to put your work in front of an audience and die if it's terrible, which it was. And I think right after that, I was like, okay, the next movie I make is going to be funny and it's going to be entertaining and it's going to be a story. And I need to learn those things. So that's kind of what I did after. But I'm a cheerleader I made when I was 26. And that was, it's funny because in the editing room for When I'm a Cheerleader, I kept thinking about that E.E. Cummings movie that I had screened here and going, let's make it shorter, go shorter, go shorter. So the movie's like 80 minutes and they were like, it actually has to be 90 minutes in order to sell the movie. And I was like, okay, I can make it 5 more minutes by adding in scenes that I think are kind of boring. And then let's have a 5-minute credit roll. So it's like the slowest credit roll ever. But that's because I didn't want to bore people because I was traumatized by boring people with my E. Cummings thing.
That's hysterical. It's also sparking me to ask a question that I didn't prep you on, but I'm curious. What is the project that each of you are either proudest about or you think has had the most impact on your career or others?
For me, in 2008, I was producing a local news show and read a memoir by a woman named Mary Johnson. It was called An Unquenchable Thirst. It was about her life as Mother Teresa's right-hand lady, basically. I became obsessed with this book. It was so amazing to me. The revelations, it was forbidden love, sex, spiritual betrayal. I mean, it was unbelievable. So I started to push other people. I'm like, you should make a film. You should write, because I didn't have that experience. And everyone was like, like not that inspired by it. So when we started in 2019, when we co-founded Rococo Punch, our production company, I went to Mary Johnson and she's like, I have an audiobook. I was like, yeah, that's not what we want to do. We want to do like a 10-part audio documentary. And she was like, all right. So we optioned this book. This is stuff I had never done before. I had no idea what I was doing. And I just figured it out with great lawyers. And so we optioned this memoir. And then I went out to every major distributor of audio here in this country and abroad. People were so scared of this story. Like, did they think, Mother Teresa, it was not a takedown at all. It was like a nuanced telling of her strengths and her weaknesses. and the women who followed her. Finally, we got one yes, and that's all we needed, you know? And I just refused to give up. I was like, this story must be told. So, you know, cut to the future, we released this 10-part series, and it was by far the most satisfying moment of my life. Like, you know, from 2008 to just pushing other people to do it, and then finally saying, damn it, I just have to do it, you know, like, get over it, figuring it out, and then it, you know, it's seeing the light of day. So I think for me, that was really great in the sense that I didn't think I could do it, figured it out, and it was beautiful. And you should all listen to it. It's called The Turning, The Sisters Who Left. And it's about Mary Johnson, but we also got to talk to 7 other women who were in Mother Teresa's order and left. So anyway, that for me still takes the cake.
I have a 2-part answer. I think the first is this film called Aftershock, which I was lucky enough to see at Sundance 2021, I believe, and we acquired it from there. It's a film about the Black maternal health care crisis, following 2 women who died in New York City at different hospitals here in 2021, and their partners became friends. And it was the friendship between these 2 men who were trying to fight for these women who had been unnecessarily, you know, in this situation that they were in, just based on the medical system and how Black women are treated within the medical system, and how women are treated within the medical system. And watching that film's impact, where we, you know, brought it to festivals and had different screenings. And I mean, the second I saw it, I called my partner and was like, you better watch this and learn something and write some stuff down, because I had just never been taken by something like that before, and have been working in documentaries or unscripted programming now for 10 years. And I'm so proud of putting that project out in the world. It's on Hulu right now. And it's really powerful, and just talks about how much we still need to do to support women in their reproductive journeys. Another reproductive story. This has followed me throughout my career. My very close friend, who was Barnard class of 2014, Mariah Bess, wrote a script called Miso. And when I moved to LA, we decided to produce it together. It's about the friendship that develops over the course of an at-home abortion between a woman and her doula. And a former roommate of mine in New York decided to come on board, and the 3 of us produced it. They acted in it. And we had an incredible female director, Kelly Walker, and an all-female and non-binary casting crew. Shot it in my apartment. Don't recommend. It was horrible. But it was a really amazing experience, and I just feel so responsible for telling stories about women and their experiences, especially when it comes to, you know, healthcare and reproductive justice. And doing that with my friends and going to festivals and seeing the success of this very small film that we didn't think would matter at all was just incredibly humbling. So those are 2 of my proudest.
I was going to say Only Murders in the Building just because we shot it. We were like the first production to shoot during COVID, and it was so hard to do. And I felt so much fear about killing Steve Martin, Selena Gomez, and Martin Short. Steve and Marty, who are in their 70s, and Selena, who had just had a kidney transplant. So yeah, it was really frightening because I knew they had to work without masks and there were no vaccines. And Steve in pre-production was like, I'm not going to die, am I, Jamie? I was like, no. But thank God for all of the protocols and masks and shields, and we went above and beyond because we were so terrified. And I still, when I watch the pilot for that, think about the scenes that really kept me up at night, which were the lobby scenes with all the extras that had to be in those meetings. And some people did get COVID that day, inevitably, because it just, the science was, you know, you test the day of, but halfway through the day, someone can get COVID. So, and they all have no masks on. So it's just the more numbers you had, the scarier it was. And there's actually the scene where Marty and Steven I think it's just Marty and Steve, have to come down the stairs, and it's like red lights, and there's all these extras that are going down the stairs too, and they're like running for their lives. And they actually were running for their lives because they were like, oh my God, which one of these extras has COVID? So yeah, that was really scary. Actually, when I was shooting that, so the rules at the time, because there were no vaccines, if someone tested positive for COVID, which was usually, they didn't test positive in the morning, but then at lunch they tested positive. That's how like crazy it was. The dog handler in one of the scenes, Bambi was her name, she tested positive at lunch, and you have to tell the COVID officer who you were near, and then those people are immediately taken off the set. So like there were times we were filming and you would look over and all of a sudden the microphone, instead of a boom operator holding it, it would just be a C-stand holding it. And the guy was just missing. And also you weren't allowed to say why they were gone, but it was so obvious. So I got like a cane that like pulled me off set, and I was like, what is going on? And they said, Bambi has named you as someone that she was near when she was dog handling. And yeah, so you're out. And I was like, what? And I said, how long am I out for? And they said, you're out for 2 weeks. And I was like, but that's the shoot. That's the whole shoot. And they were like, sorry. So I went back home and they said, we'll give you a monitor and a microphone from home, and you can speak on like an iPad. And it was so ridiculous. So some of those scenes, I ended up only being out for 2 days because I fought my way back in, because the science had evolved that if you were outside, which I was outside when I was near Bambi, and she also had a mask on, I had a mask on. So I fought my way back. But 2 days I was on a monitor and hearing like an actor say, do you think it's okay if I do this in the scene? And I'm thinking, oh my God, no, don't do that, don't do that. And saying on the monitor with like an assistant holding an iPad, like, no, don't do that, don't do that. And like the actor not listening. And it was just like me texting, like, tell the actor, don't do that. It was a disaster. Do not direct from home. It is a disaster. Mayhem. So yeah, so that was a really big challenge. But I would say creatively, probably the thing I'm most proud of is the pilot of A League of Their Own. And I only say that because I had watched the original movie, which I really loved, and was actually really scared to step in the feet of Penny Marshall, who's amazing. But as a queer person, I was like, Rosie O'Donnell as a husband? I don't think so. And so many queer relationships that were kind of hinted at in Penny's movie, but not explored. And as a person who was taking a women's studies class at Barnard, I had written a paper about that movie and how homophobic it was. So I was excited professionally to be paid and have a nice budget and a great cast and great writers to finally do the queer version of the story. And what was incredible was I got to go to Cooperstown and meet the 9,500-year-old women who were on the baseball teams in the 40s. And you know how like sometimes when you get older, I've only noticed it in men until this moment, they get like very sexual. I think there's something in your brain that is like activated when you get older. I don't know, it hasn't happened to me yet. I'd love to talk to these ladies. But I feel like my father, I saw it happen, like he was very conservative, and then as he got into his 80s, he all of a sudden all kinds of like sexual things were coming out of his mouth that I'd never heard before. Well, being at this Cooperstown thing with all these older women who were asking me to sit on their laps and calling me Miss America and very like touchy-feely, I was like, wow, okay, there are a lot of queer women here, how great. And so I really got to talk to them and say, like, what was it like being on the baseball league? What was it like being queer? What was it like going to gay bars in the 40s? And because I think they were much older and the world has changed a lot, at least one-on-one, I got a lot of stories that were incredible. And they were like, we were sleeping with each other. We were sleeping with the fans. There were all these amazing queer bars that we would go to. They all had windows in the bathroom. So when the police would come, we would run to the bathroom and jump out the window. Yeah, just so many amazing stories. So all of that got to go into the remake, which was very fun to direct.
I think I'd like to now open it up to the audience for Q&A. We'll have somebody, I think, coming around with a microphone. Oh, there's a microphone stand right there. So if anybody has any questions,
You could probably
please.
just talk too. That's really intimidating to have to go up to a microphone. Yeah.
My question is for Jamie. I'm curious, what factors do you consider when deciding whether or not to go into production as a director, executive producer?
The main thing is if I just connect to it. And also I don't like to do the exact same thing over and over again. So probably if someone said like, will you do a gay story set in a gay rehab? I'd be like, I've already done it. Or will you do queer people in a sports league? I've already done it. So just something I'm interested in. And actually a producer once said to me, the thing about directors is it's all about timing, which I think is very true too, because like I was just working on a project for a year in London, and anyone who emailed me or asked me, hey, will you look at this? I just was so consumed in this other project that I was not mentally ready to even think about anything else. So it kind of has to hit me at the right time too, where I actually am not consumed with something else. So I don't know, it's timing, and then it's also what I'm in the moment, what I'm interested in. And it's not always queer stories, and it really just depends on, like in COVID, I was really interested in Only Murders because I just wanted to make something funny because life was really, really hard at that moment. So that was appealing to me. If someone had asked me would I do like some, deep, hard thing, I probably would have said no. So I don't know, I just try to follow my heart, because the truth about directing is any project you take, it's 2 years of your life. So you have to live with that decision for 2 years. So it's a huge commitment, like emotionally, spiritually, and time-wise. So all those things come into play.
I'll ask a question.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jordan. I'm the class of 25. I'm a student worker. I'm a theater major myself, and I kind of have a question for all of you about how being a part of Barnard, the arts program at Barnard, has increasingly gotten better in time. How has been being in the arts and Barnard, like clubs or programs, how has that really shaped you? And what do you wish was there then that you hopefully see now?
I actually didn't do a ton of arts at Barnard because I was determined to have a very linear life and be a lawyer. So I'm probably not the best person to answer, but I think what I will say is that everything around me reminded me and went back to my heart to tell me, listen to what you really want to do. And it took me a while to wake up to that, but the fact that it was everywhere, I think allowed me to just embrace it eventually and say, okay, you're gonna have a less traditional, more challenging trajectory that will be bumpy, but it will be okay. So.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was in Bacante, which I might have said, and I also was a dancer while I was here. So I just loved performing arts, and I did that, up until college. So it was just a big part of my life. I wish I had gotten involved in anything film related, because there's an amazing film program here, and it was just not on my radar. The WBR as well, BAR as well, was really cool. Like, there's just a lot of cool stuff here, and I'm sure now it's even like more expanded. So I guess I wish I had followed my curiosity a little bit more while I was here, because like you, I was kind of partially there, but didn't really learn to listen to it until after. And also exploring New York City more, and like getting out of the bubble, like the theater, like just everything that's here. I live in LA now, which is not the same. And, just being able to be around art, I wish I had taken a bit more advantage of that. And that's probably one of my biggest pieces of advice now is like, be really curious, go to things. If something sounds remotely interesting, you just don't know how it's going to impact you or be in the back of your head when you're working on a project or anything like that. But I think my creative community here, one of my friends who I made that movie Miso with was in Bacante with me. So those relationships that I started here have been part of my professional life. I also worked for Sheila Nevins, who is an icon, who went here and really started the documentary genre, was hired by a Barnard alum. I hired a Barnard alum to replace me in that department. So like there's this amazing lineage of Barnard women in the business, which I also didn't know while I was here. I learned that after, and those women have continued to really support me. And so I think, just being involved with as much as possible, because you just don't know where people are going to end up and how they're going to influence you.
I think I would say the same thing too. Try to get involved in a bunch of different things. I remember my senior year seeing like the varsity show and being like, oh, that's so cool. Why didn't I like volunteer to do props or something on that? And the film program, all the different stuff. I would just say, yeah, volunteer to work on stuff. And also I always did classes 4 days a week so that I could do 1 day a week for internships.
And a slight question, I'm sorry. Jessica, you talked about being obsessed with a project so much that you wanted to do it. Has there ever been a project you've been obsessed with or loved but couldn't do it or had to draw back from? And what was it like to this is for all of you, to receive a no or couldn't do a project because of that?
I live with so many projects that I love and adore that have only been said no to. I don't know, I think it's something you just learn to live with, and you have to, I never give up on a project. I just think maybe not now. Whenever someone says no to me, I'm like, you mean not now? I mean, I don't know. I just, it's hard. It's a hard part of being a producer. And I don't know if it really gets easier. I mean, it gets easier to bear, right? I think what it sometimes hits as is that you just don't see what I see. And that is a reminder that is what we do. That is our work, is that we try to help people see what we see. And sometimes it takes a year and sometimes it takes 10 years.
We have a question here.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here. This has been really insightful and great. I have a question for everyone. This is kind of a lofty, big question, so take it as you will. What are each of your thoughts on the future of the industry? I know we're in kind of a weird time now with, yes, the strike, but also streaming, how it's going to be sustainable as a career. Just, general thoughts from each of you on that.
I just inhaled as I heard you ask that question, because I could go on. No, it's great. I love talking about this. I think, I've been lucky enough to be on the network and buying side for my entire career. So, being in the rooms where people are making decisions or explaining why they're not making a decision. And I think we are in a moment right now where there's a lot of fear around what success means. And obviously success has changed with streaming, and, numbers aren't what they once were in terms of viewership or, theatrical and just all the ways that we're used to content being distributed. So I think right now we're in the midst of a real push and pull between like art and commerce, not to sound obnoxious, but really it's like what we do is artistic. And, I learned that here. I tried to remind myself of that every day. It's like, these are stories and they matter and they help remind us, the point of being human. And sometimes you're going to have to go back to someone a few times. And as someone who has been pestered by people for years over projects, like, no, it's good, because it's like, eventually when I take the time to really listen to it, it's like, oh no, like I see what you were saying. So I think we're in this moment where risk is a dirty word, and that's really hard because inherently every story is a risk and not everybody's going to understand it. You know, it really depends who you're talking to. So I think the pendulum has to swing the other way and stuff has to get on air. So like, you know, right now we're in a bit of a holding pattern, but that's going to change because there are budgets that need to be utilized, there are schedules that need to be filled. It feels bad, but it's going to have to change because that's the nature of the business. So I'm trying to be as positive as I can be. It's very easy to be negative right now, but I think finding the projects that really matter to you, like that's the work to do right now. So when the floodgates do open again, which they inevitably will, you're ready, you're prepared, you're ready to tell somebody why this needs to be made right here, right now. But streaming's going to have to be corrected. All of those things, you know, are to be figured out on a macro level. But I think story will always be the thing that matters.
It was long, sorry.
Thank you. Hi, I wanted to ask you, because this is such a hot political atmosphere now with the post Roe versus Wade. I went to Barnard a couple years after Roe versus Wade, and I had my own abortion. So for me, and I'm asking you, has that affected your career? Is this like an ongoing topic you want to research? I ended up writing my memoir and calling one of the chapters "Choosing," because I was raised in a very strict Catholic household. So are people asking you to write about that? Do you feel a need to write about a woman's right to choose?
I think that we all should tell those stories. I do agree with you that risk is, it's really hard to be on the studio side and pitching stories that involve abortion or anything controversial, red state, blue state, all that stuff. It's really tough and to get those things financed. But I think it is our duty to push it forward, regardless of whether it's tough or not. So I have seen a swing in a conservative direction from all the streamers and the studios. So I think there's a lot of work to be done for sure, especially on a woman's choice and trans issues, which have gotten so insane in the last couple of years of the amount of laws passed against trans kids. It's disgusting. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, and I do think it's our obligation. And I think Barnard has helped us realize it is our obligation. And I will also say sexism is still alive and well. Racism is alive and well. It's all there. I just worked on a show that we tested, and when they do testing for streaming shows, if they're basically deciding on how much marketing they want to give it. And we tested off the charts for women. And then we had one test group that was men, and they were like, we don't get it. And so the people at Amazon were like, okay, well, you know, men didn't get it. I was like, yeah, but we tested off the charts for women. That's half the world. That's half of your streaming people. And they were like, yeah, but, you know, it's funny, like when we're talking about it internally, it's really split on gender lines. I'm like, yeah, duh. So I was really nervous because all the heads that were deciding things were men, which is really sucks, and why it's so important that we have women who are working in these places, because thank God a new head woman came in and was like, this is amazing. This is the best thing I've seen that you guys have sent me, and I'm new to this job. And I was like, oh, thank God for a woman. Thank God. So it just makes you realize how hard it's been for all storytellers throughout, you know, television and movies and all that. If the only people making decisions at the high level and fighting in those rooms that you're in, if it is just men, then there's so many women's stories that women do care and want to see. And, you know, like I think about my film as art the first class I took that was called Film is Art, every movie we studied was a white male story and director and writer. And I remember taking the class and being like, these are cool movies, but like, it doesn't really move me. Like, it's not my story. I don't know. I don't feel like I care that much about any of these movies. And it wasn't until I started exploring on my own and found like Jane Campion or, you know, other Penny Marshall or Clueless, where I was like, oh, I love movies. So it is important that we fight on every level as women too, to get our stories told. Because I do think, you know, we all deserve to have our stories told. And to go back to your question about, is there a future in this business? I mean, even in the cave times, people were telling stories and writing the things on the walls. So I think there'll always be storytelling. And I think ChatGPT will be telling some of the stories, and writers and directors will be punching it up. But I think, I think there's always going to be a market for storytelling. And I think there's too many streamers right now. And I think, like in any business, when there was VHS and Betamax, one of them went down. I think some of the streamers are going to fold because there's just too many right now. So the business is really changing. And I think the strike and all the big talks that are happening right now are AI, which is going to affect all of us in every single field, including, you know, there's nothing a computer can do better than give notes to scripts. So there's going to be a big thing going on with AI for all of us. But I also think the business model has got to change, because the profits, like you're talking about, you know, shows don't do well or these numbers, we don't know those numbers because they hide them from everyone. So the only people who know what's actually doing well are the people in the rooms. The artists have no clue. Like, I'd have no idea how well Only Murders in the Building did. I have no clue. Because if they were to tell me how well it did, I have a feeling it did pretty well, they would have to pay me. So there's a lot of secrecy right now, which is really unfair. So I think that's one of the things they're trying to resolve.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here. I'm reading a question on behalf of a Zoom attendee. This is for everyone or anyone who wants to answer. How do you deal with projects that have failed or gone differently? And this is coming from Butterfly/Olivia, class of 08. Oh, you didn't hear me? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, do you mind just repeating that?
Oh, so sorry. I didn't want to speak too loud, and then I didn't speak loud enough. So this is on behalf of a Zoom attendee. How do you deal with projects that have failed? And kind of like thinking back on them, what have you learned from the process? And this is from Butterfly/Olivia, class of 08, who's joining us on Zoom.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think failure inherently is subjective because it depends on how you're measuring that, you know, and I always look at like my slate of projects as having different goals. So, you know, did something meet the goal that I wanted it to meet? If not, you know, there are the post conversations around how did the numbers do and what are the learnings and all that. But I think if it is something you really believed in and someone connected with it, then I don't think of it as a failure. I mean, I think there are some things that are broader and more appealing and have more press around them or whatever, but I mean, making something is a win, especially as an independent artist. Getting something made, as you both know, like it is a feat to get something made. To get something on television is like historic. It's so hard. And there's so many scripts that get halfway there, or projects that for whatever reason, someone leaves the job, like whatever happens, you know, they don't see the light of day. So I think failure is a bit subjective. Of course, there's always something to learn, but if you made it and you believe in it, you know, that's more of the thing I think to hold on to.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it. We have time for only one more question. I did see a hand in the front earlier.
Hi, Flo Low, BCO3. Thank you so much. This has been really wonderful. I work in fundraising for the arts. I know you are doing such incredible work, all of you, in telling stories that need to be told, amplifying voices that need to be heard, and the stories in themselves are a gift. But I'd really be interested in hearing any feedback that has come back to you on a specific project, on an unexpected or expected or hopeful impact of what has happened as a result of some of the stories that you've brought to light.
Oh, that's a good question. So a recent series that we did was actually season 2 of The Turning. It's called Room of Mirrors, and it's all about the world of American ballet and George Balanchine. And it was so interesting because we really had the host of this series, it was her idea to do ballet, and we all learned along the way that she actually had been a very serious ballerina for many years and had an injury. She'd never told any of us about this. And so we said to her, you know, we really need to tell your story at some point in this series. And for her, it was very like, but it's not about me. Anyway, we did it in a way that she felt comfortable with, and it was authentic. And I was worried. I didn't know, people thought it would be navel gazing, but when it came out, the amount of response of former dancers or people who hadn't made it all the way, or even people who were musicians or different things, I mean, the outpouring was incredible. And I think that for me was just, it was interesting because we took a risk, but it was, in the end, it was like a regular person's story that got everyone else sort of activated. So I think that for me was really rewarding.
Yeah, for me, the narrative film that I produced with another Barnard alum a few years ago, when we were going to film festivals, I was shocked by just the things that women would come up to us and say. That again was a film about an at-home abortion and the relationship that, you know, developed between a doula and the woman who was having the procedure done. And somebody came up to us in the restroom and said, I've never seen my experience told like that. Like, you know, thank you so much. Just how many women said that they had not seen that conversation, you know, told in that way. So that was really meaningful to me. And just, you know, sometimes when you're so close to something, you don't think about its impact, but that one seemed to get a lot of good reaction in terms of how that story was told. So that was very meaningful.
I would say probably so many people telling me that they watched But I'm a Cheerleader on one of their first dates, and then they had a nice romantic evening. That's all I got.
I think that's the perfect way to end. Jamie, Camille, Jessica, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.